Hi everyone, my name is Łukasz Pawłowski. I'm a program manager on the Power BI team working on custom visuals. Today for Build, I'm going to show you a couple of things about how to build custom visuals. We'll talk about all the tooling that you need to know, the core API set that you need to know, and we'll also talk about some future directions that you should be aware of if you're starting today. So let's dive in. So the first thing about Power BI is that Power BI allows you to take data from any data source, whether it's the smallest CSV file to the largest big data system, and visualize them for your users so that your users see the data accurately, quickly, and make good decisions to drive your businesses forward. Now with custom visualizations, Power BI allows you to show the users the data exactly the way they need to see it. There's many cases where built-in visualizations are wonderful, but your users really want to see something very custom and bespoke so that they get the value that they need and they see it. Examples, circuit diagrams. You would want to be able to show a circuit diagram, for example, to a user who's doing electrical systems. And so Power BI allows you to build custom visualizations that are portable, reusable, and very easy for yourself as a developer to write, and also for a business user to consume and use. So let's go through and take a look at what that looks like. Before we dive too far in, we do need to say that we're making sure that all of our visualizations are consistently used across the entire parts of Power BI, everything from the service to the desktop and the mobile applications. Our visualizations are implemented using an open source visualization stack that's available on GitHub. I'll show you the repo when we go to the demo, but it's available on the Microsoft core repo under the project Power BI Visuals. All of our code, the one for the visuals that you see in Power BI, is available in that repo. It's all MIT licensed, which means you can use it for your personal projects, but you can also use it for corporate and profitable uses. When we started out to build custom visuals, we really knew that we had to do something a little bit different. We wanted to make it incredibly easy for someone to get started. And so when you go and you take a look at building custom visuals, you can actually take a look at some great examples that our community has created out on visuals.powerbi.com. And using those visuals as simple as going to the gallery, downloading a visual, and then importing it into a report. I'll show you what I mean a little bit later. What this means to you as a developer is that it's really easy to get a great set of examples. A lot of these custom visuals that are in the gallery actually come with GitHub repos, so you can go take a look at the code bases behind those visuals and evolve them towards your own purposes to show the data the way that you want to. We do encourage you to share your visualizations, especially if you're an enthusiast, with others by publishing them to the gallery. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on. Now, if you're looking to build, a product around Power BI and a product with custom visualizations, you actually do not need to share them with the community. You can actually hold on to them and use them if you're a consultant, for example, for your own projects. But if you're building custom visualizations as an enthusiast, we do highly encourage you to tell us about them and share them with the world. People really enjoy them. We also have a running blog series for Visual Awesomeness Unleashed, which helps you get some recognition for the great work that you're doing. So I'll show you that here in a second. One last thing that as I jump into the demo is you'll see that we've actually created a set of tooling that allows you to get started really easily with building Power BI visuals. Everything from a GitHub repo that builds on open source operating systems like Linux. We use Gulp underneath the covers to do the build. And also web tooling that allows you to go build visualizations easily. I'll show you what that all is here presently. So let's jump out of the PowerPoint. And the first thing that I wanted to show you was just an example of a custom visualization. So here I am in Power BI. I have data that's provided to me. Power BI, as I mentioned earlier, allows you to pull data from any number of different data sources, whether they're CSV files or big data systems, on-premise systems through hybrid connectivity. And when you're building a custom visual, you don't need to worry about any of that data process. What you do is you declare the fields that you want to be included in your visualization. I'll show you how you do that. And then the user binds data from any of our data sources to your visualization. And what we do underneath the covers for you is we actually do all of the data binding. And so if you take a look here on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to zoom in really quickly, you'll see that this visualization has a timestamp, has a running value, has a title and a message. And you can see over here that I have a set of fields in this entity called dates. And you can see the checked ones. These are the ones that I'm using in this particular visualization. As a visualization developer, you no longer have to hard code your data binding. If you're familiar with D3, you'll find that, like when you're building D3 visuals, quite often you're building them to a very specific data layout with a very specific input JSON, for example. With Power BI, all of that gets abstracted from you, so you get to build a portable, reusable visualization regardless of the data source, regardless of the data set. So long as this contract that your visualization has exposed is adhered to by the visualization consumer, which is the person who's using your visual. So great. Let's take a look here at this visualization. So I'm just going to go play this visual. This is a custom visualization that's fully integrated into Power BI. What you'll notice is that as the visualization proceeds, it's cross-filtering and highlighting. We provide APIs so that you can build that kind of experience just as integrated as was what you see with the core basic Power BI visuals, so that you can have really bespoke visuals that meet your users' needs without having to worry about whether they're going to have the full capabilities. You'll also see here, if I take a look at this visualization, you'll see that we have full integration with all of the different data properties and formatting properties that are available. All of these properties are exposed by this visualization and deeply integrated into Power BI. Of course, if I pause, I can go and click individual data points, and you can see that they cross-highlight and cross-filter, just like any other visualization that we have in Power BI. So you can build really compelling data experiences. So now let's talk about how you actually go ahead and do that. So the first thing that you need to know is that we've open sourced our entire visualization stack on GitHub. That means that the code for all of our visualizations is available here. And you can go browse and you can take a look at how we implement our own visualizations. The code, you could just go and fork the repo. And we actually use Gulp here to go build it. The code itself, for most of our visualizations, is just JavaScript, essentially, with D3. Now, the JavaScript, we don't actually write the visualizations directly in JavaScript. We actually write them in TypeScript. TypeScript is typed to JavaScript. It allows us to build unit tests. Those unit tests then allow us to have good processes around build health and catch regressions sooner than having JavaScript, which sometimes is a little bit harder to figure out for that. So what we really tried to do is we tried to make sure that you have within this repo all of the things that you need to build high-quality, reusable visualizations. So our code is there. You'll find also all of our unit tests are there, and you can go benefit from the patterns that we've used. Now, when you're looking at this repo, sometimes it can be a little intimidating to get started. So what we've also done is we've included a visualization playground. You'll see, we have unit tests. You can go run them and whatnot. And you can also see that we have a number of different things. We have contribution guidelines, so the repo is open for contributions. If you spot a bug, feel free to submit a bug fix. If you have an issue, feel free to ask us questions. Now, what we also have is we have this visualization playground, and that allows you very easily to go play with any of the slicers, any of the visualizations that we have in the repo. That allows you to go test those in the web browser. Now, when you're testing custom visual, you're going to test it using the browser's debugger, because the TypeScript gets compiled into JavaScript, and then the JavaScript is run with a visual. So you'll just be debugging right here. Okay. You'll also see that we added a couple of nice options here for web view and mobile view. As I mentioned earlier, we want to make it really easy for you to build visualizations to work across all of our products, the service, the Power BI desktop, as well as the Power BI mobile apps. And so here, with a click of a button, you can go and test all of your mobile supportability, because the mobile apps have a certain specific different visualizations or different interactions that you do want to be testing with. So now you can build a visualization right here inside your forked repo. But to bring it into Power BI, you will actually need to go and use some of our web-based developer tools. So let me show you what those are. And as I do that, I switch back into the Power BI service. to use the web-based developer tools, you do need to sign up for Power BI. Signing up for Power BI is very easy and free. So if I go to powerbi.com, you'll see here that there's a sign-in button. Here we go. Here's the Get Started Free button. And then you can go and sign up for the service. You'll need to enter your corporate email address. You'll get an email back with a registration link that you click, and then you're into the service. And when you come into the service, you will see an experience maybe a little bit similar to this one, where you see the Get Data experience here, and then you can pull in some data. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to go over to the settings gear. I'm going to show you the developer tools. So the dev tools are right here. Now, these are web-based developer tools that allow you to build custom visualizations. Those visualizations, of course, get compiled from TypeScript into JavaScript and then run here in the browser. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go press the compile and run button, and you'll see that we have a fully working visualization already pre-built inside the developer tool, so it's really easy for you to get started. Now, when you're building this, here you have your TypeScript code, and here you have CSS. We recommend that you take all of your code that you want to have inside your visual and you inline it here inside this, the visual itself. One thing that we get asked quite often is that some developers want to use libraries that they might pull from a CDN. Now, this is a topic which is interesting because our visualization interfaces, the APIs that we're using, are still in a preview state. And so there's a few things that we will be evolving as we go forward. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later once I jump back into the slide deck. So today, you can pull scripts from other sources just using jQuery get script. We actually don't recommend that you do that, just because we want to make sure that as we move from the preview version of the APIs to the V1 versions of the APIs going forward, we will have full compatibility for your visualization. So if you absolutely need it, you can do it now, but we do recommend that you just inline those things into the tools. So with that covered, let's go ahead and take a look at the core elements of the interface. So we have several things, right? So the first one is 3 methods that you need to know about. So there's the init method, and now this method gets called the very first time data is bound to your visual. Okay, and what's going to happen is you're going to get this this init options object is going to be passed to you, and that init options object will include things like the color palette. So all that formatting goodness that I showed you earlier is transported through the API into your visualization right here. You'll also see that you have a host container, and what we want you to do is we want you to write your code so that you stay within that host element. I'll talk a little bit about our plan going forward for sandboxing once I jump back into the slides. But for the time being, let's just assume that your visual should work nicely when it's on the page with other visuals, and multiple instances of your same visual should behave nicely when they're both on the same page. Right? So you really want to spend a little bit of extra time writing your code to be reentrant and to make sure that it doesn't have conflicts. Usually that starts with selecting only things that are underneath the element that's handed to you. Okay, and then the last thing is obviously in the init method you can go ahead and set up any static variables or anything that you want to have preserved across for that instantiation of that visualization. I will call out one little thing here about this debugger tag. As we move forward, we will be having sandboxing, and what that means is that your code will be dynamically injected into an iframe. If you want to debug that, the easiest way is to place this little debugger tag here in the top of your init function, and then when you're running in your browser debugger, it will break automatically the moment the init function is called. Okay? So the second method that you need to know about is update. Now, update is really the lifeblood of your visualization, right? This is where all of the goodness happens that binds all of the data to the visual elements that get presented on the screen. Update is called repeatedly by Power BI. So every time the data changes, what does that mean really in Power BI? In Power BI, you can cross-highlight and filter. So I can have one visualization affect the data that's sent to another visualization. Update is called each time a user interacts with the data in that way. Likewise, if the user is resizing the visualization, update is called again. And so you want to make sure that update is optimized for reentrancy and is really a compact piece of code. There's several things that happen in update that you should be coding for. The first one is this concept of data views. So I mentioned earlier when I was showing you the product that the end user binds data fields to the visualization in an abstract way using a contract. I'll show you that contract in a minute. But the key thing that you need to know is that all those choices that you made about the contract that you exposed and the choices the user provided for the instance data that will be bound to your visualization is all wrapped up inside this data view object that you get. And that data view also has hanging off of it all of the detail formatting options that will allow you to inherit the same behaviors Power BI has. So for example, if you want to do number formatting, those properties are hanging off of the elements within this data view object. I encourage you to spend some quality time with the data view object. It's a little bit longer and in-depth than I have time to spend here today with you. But the data view is really where the core magic is. What you'll first want to do is you want to convert from your data view into a view model that's appropriate for your visual. I won't go through all of the code. It's usually just a bunch of kind of recursive loopy code that pulls out the data into something that maps to your individual view model. So the next thing that happens is that you're going to start drawing your visualization. Now, in most of the visualizations that we have here in Power BI, you'll see that we're using D3. You're not limited to using D3. You can actually use any JavaScript library that you wish. For example, we have in our visualization gallery a 3D map that's actually using WebGL to render. You can use Canvas as well if you wish to do that. So you can use a mix of those kinds of technologies all to render your visualization. And so then the last method is destroy. I won't show you destroy, just simply it allows you to clean up when the visualization is removed from the page. So we've been talking a lot about bindings, and so I wanted to mention capabilities. Capabilities is where your visualization declares all of the properties that it is going to receive from the host, which in this case is Power BI. And so let me just show you the properties for this particular visualization. The first thing is defining data roles. And what data roles are doing is they're telling Power BI what are the buckets into which data fields can be bound. So here we're going to have a category and a Y bucket. And then what I can do is I can see that the first one is a grouping. So Power BI will know that it's going to do some aggregation for the category. And then you're going to see that Y is a measure, so that's usually a number. So that's what will be aggregated. The second thing is this mappings. And here you're actually going to choose the kind of data view. We have a number of different kinds of data views we support. This visualization is using a categorical data view. Typically, most folks are using either a categorical data view or a table data view. We also support a matrix data view that you can play with. It's a little bit more advanced usage. Most people can get their visualizations completed with a categorical or a table data view. And so here what we're doing is we're telling the categories how they're supposed to aggregate using we're going to aggregate over all the categories. And then we're going to select the measure, and the measure will automatically be aggregated. Now you'll notice here that we don't specify the aggregate, and that's an interesting thing that you as a developer need to understand. The end user who's actually using your visualization specifies the aggregate during the binding operation, so you here do not have to worry about it. If the user wants to bind an average value onto your visual, they will. If they want to do a basic aggregation like a sum, they will. So here you don't have to worry about that. You'll just get a set of categories, a set of rows with categories, and a set of aggregated values, and then you can visualize them with the layout that you chose. We also have some capabilities here around data reduction algorithms. So oftentimes when you're thinking about data, you have to remember that there can be millions and millions of rows of data. So we have a few built-in data reduction algorithm. This one is using top, and it's not specifying the window size. So it's allowing Power BI to choose the window size that's going to get bound to it. You can also choose things like window, and then you can call methods like get more data that will actually return for you more data. So You have a number of options. We also have a smart sampling option. And what that means is if you imagine drawing a line chart. Now, line charts has, peaks and it has valleys. And what we do is intelligently over the entire scope of the data set, we know how to extract those features of that series and give you back a representative sample so that you don't have to draw, millions of data points onto the screen. And still your users have the right data to make decisions. So then the last piece in this capabilities is objects. Objects is how you interact with the formatting pane. Objects is also how you persist user-selected options within your visualization. So you have a number of different kinds of options, but the important thing is that there's a life cycle that you have to implement. The first one is you have to declare the object. So this ensures that Power BI has all of the properties enumerated for your visualization. Then you have to enumerate them when Power BI asks for it. And lastly, when you receive an update call, you need to receive the values that Power BI is handing you for those properties, including any default values, and respect them and store them if you wish. Okay, so those are 3 things that you need to do to implement a visual. Now, obviously, no visual is complete without some CSS, and so you can go ahead and bind in your CSS. One thing we do ask, and we've seen this very commonly with custom visual authors, is that they'll use class names that are overly generic in their CSS. For example, text. Well, that's rife for conflicts. So do try to make your CSS classes scoped so that your visual works nicely on the page. Okay? Now, when you're done with your visual development, what you can do is you can actually press this export button. What this export button does is it allows you to name your visual. So in this case, we're going to call it Table Simple. Allows you to provide a publisher name, provide an icon. You can upload your different kinds of icon. You also have a few options here if you want to submit your visual to the gallery. And then you can also put in some support information. But the crux of this is that when I press export, what gets downloaded, and I'll just zoom in on this just so that you see it, is this tablesample.pbi viz. What this means is that you have a fully portable visualization that now you can use in hand to developers, to end users who then can use them within a report or a dashboard. Okay? So now what does that all look like? How does a user actually use a custom visual? So let's go back here to my report. So this is the report that I was showing you earlier. And what I can do is I can press this magic little import button. Let me just repeat that since you may not have seen it. I'll just zoom in here. You see this little ... It says import from file. This is available for you in the service as well as in the Power BI desktop. And when you click it, what happens is you get this little import dialog. And now what you can do is you can pull any of the PBI viz files that you have access to, and you can import them. And you'll see that it's importing, and when it's done, the visualization will appear here in the visualization pane. Okay? Now, that's all well and good. And then, of course, you can see, when you're using that visual, you'll see all of the properties that were defined for it. Now, that's really good, but sometimes what you want to do is you actually want to go get a few visualizations to get started with. So what we have is we have a visualizations gallery. I think I mentioned it earlier. If you go to visuals.powerbi.com, it just redirects you to this site. And what you'll see here is you'll see then a set of visualizations that we have available. And visualizations are being added all the time. So here we have time brush, table sorter, network navigation, attribute selector. We have now well over 45 visualizations that are here. This visual I'll just call out because it implements the WebGL that I was mentioning earlier. We have things like network graphs for more sophisticated things. We even have aquariums and so forth. One thing that I would encourage you to take a look at is that most of these visualizations have a GitHub repo associated with them. So you can actually go grab their code, assuming it's licensed under MIT license, for example, and continue right where folks left off. What you can do to start using these visuals, you just press the download button, you agree to the text, and then again you get a PBI viz file that you can import the way that I was showing earlier. So that gives you most of the information that you need for actually starting to build a custom visual. One further thing that we do have is if you go out to YouTube, you'll see that we have a Microsoft Power BI channel. And in this channel, you will see a developer section. And this developer section has a lot of videos that will help you understand how to build for applications for Power BI, but also a few additional videos about some of the depth of building custom visuals for Power BI. Great. So let's jump back into the slides. So what I showed you is I showed you how you can get started with our Microsoft Power BI Visuals repo out on GitHub. That's MIT licensed, so it's available for you today. And that will give you all of the code you need to build high-quality visualizations. I showed you the web tools, which are the dev tools under the settings menu that allow you to finalize, test, and export your visualizations. And I showed you both how to import a visual that you yourself build and also how to import visuals that other folks have built and shared on the gallery. Okay? So it's really trying to make it easy for you as a developer to get started, start implementing visuals with a very simple interface that's declarative and abstracts all of the concerns about how to pull in data so that you can actually build reusable and portable visualizations. So with that, let's mention a couple of additional topics. April is coming really soon. In fact, you may be watching this after build, and probably sandboxing will already be enabled by then. So sandboxing is the next step in our evolution of custom visuals to be more trusted systems. I don't know if you noticed it just when I was navigating the UI. At some point there was a little warning that said, hey, the visual is a custom visual, you have to enable it. I breezed past it really quickly. We want to get to a point where custom visuals are fully trusted. The first step is building a sandbox. So why are we doing this? We've noticed that visualization authors do weird and wonderful things. It's really amazing to see the breadth of ideas that people have. The challenge is that sometimes developers don't do things like make sure their visuals are reentrant, make sure their visuals aren't overriding CSS styles, and making sure that visuals can be handled, more than one visual can be handled on an individual page. And so we need to build a level of isolation so that only well-written, vetted visualizations run without the sandbox, and the basic one, and all the other ones will run inside the sandbox. One thing that we're also doing is we've noticed that many visualization authors have explored our APIs that are exposed on our page. They've done this in the debugger. In the debugger in say Chrome or in Edge, you'll actually be able to enumerate a lot of different kinds of objects. Not all of those were intended to be supported. And so one recommendation I have for you as you're building custom visuals is to try to adhere as strictly to what's documented in the GitHub repo in the wiki for supported interfaces. And then what you'll find out when you test in the sandbox that if you're straying too far from that, some of those APIs won't work inside the sandbox. And that's a great indicator that you're using something that wasn't intended to be supported. Now, in the next slide, I'll talk about our V1 plans for our API. But for now, let's just stay on the sandbox. One thing I will say is that gallery visualizations, anything that's in that visuals.powerbi.com gallery, will not run inside the sandbox. And so we're whitelisting them. As we move forward, we will also add service capabilities that will allow you as a developer, but more so the tenant admin and users in Power BI, to also be able to whitelist specific visualizations so that you get the visualization to run without a sandbox. So a few do's and don'ts that you should be aware of. The first one is the sandbox itself is an iframe, and so don't use iframes inside your visuals, or if you want to make your visual run inside an iframe when it's not in the sandbox that you submitted to the gallery, you'll just write some conditional code for iframes. Don't expect the local storage and such to be available. It is a sandbox. We are locking things down a little bit. Some of the other things like fonts and CSS may not be available to you initially. We're working as we build our V1 APIs to enable all of those things in a principled way. The next thing that I would say is that you should absolutely go and test your visual in a sandbox. If you pass the question mark sandbox visuals enabled equals 1 flag on the URL when you're in the web service, it will enable the sandbox, and you can even test it today. Okay, we also have a thread down here where you can report issues. We are taking feedback. We have made some fixes based off of the feedback that's on that thread. So do join the conversation with us. The next thing is API versions. So our current APIs are in a preview state. What that means to you as a developer, and you may have seen some traffic, on Stack Overflow or whatnot, around some API changes that periodically cause visualization authors to have to adapt their visualizations. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build out a V1 set of APIs. We're in the very early stage of that. And those APIs will be supported for the long term. And what that means to you is that you'll just simply use interfaces, you'll write your visual, the visual won't break with various builds of Power BI. And you'll know very well when we're going to introduce a new API version beyond the initial one. So that you can adapt to it and have enough time to migrate your visualizations. So this is something that we're currently working on. There's a thread here in the slide where you can jump in. If you have ideas of what kinds of APIs we should be building, go ahead and jump in. We want to hear your feedback as we evolve the API to support the custom visuals that you yourselves want to go create for your users. So with that, let me conclude. I think what you've seen is that it's really easy to get started writing custom visuals for Power BI. If you know D3 already, if you know JavaScript and web programming, it's so incredibly easy to get started. We have a lot of great examples out on the GitHub repo, so I recommend that you go take a look at that. Fork it. If you're using Visual Studio, it builds really nicely. If you're using non-Visual Studio, it also builds really nicely. So it's really easy to get started. And then use our developer tools in the web to export your visual and package it and then use it within reports. You can find us out on Stack Overflow. You can find us out on the community, on the Power BI community. So reach out to us. Tell us what you need. Tell us how you're using Power BI and the crazy visualizations that you're building. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to give you advice on how to implement them. Ask us questions. Submit issues on the GitHub repo. And most of all, submit your visuals to the gallery so that everyone in the world can see the amazing work that you're doing. So with that, I'll sign off. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy all of Build.